Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. Yes. Good. 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 And I'm going to ask you also make sure that you can see the screen. Is that visible? Okay. So my name is Esperanza Leon. I'm the head of education here at LongHouse, and I want to welcome you all on this rainy day. And thank you for braving the elements. Fortunately, it's not torrential, but nonetheless, we really do appreciate that you're here. And I'm so pleased to have, this is our last talk in the series Insider Outsider that we have partnered with Nez Perce, and Jeremy Dennis is here in the back. Thank you, Jeremy, for giving us this wonderful selection of artists that have been artists in residence in your program this summer. And so Savannah LeCornu is here visiting us. Did you bring this liquid sunshine with you from?
No, I don't think so, because it's been really hot and terrible the whole time I've been here. So, and I've been here for 3 weeks, so I don't think this is my fault.
All right, well, we can get settled and we'll get started. We're going to have sort of an interesting, we've had these talks now, in my experience, they've been going on here for 3 years at LongHouse, and they have been historically just talks, but this year we tried a few different things, which included having this hands-on portion. And Savannah, you've been very willing and amenable to the idea of doing this today. I know you just recently had a workshop at the Bridgehampton Museum. And I was going to introduce you with my phone and notes, but now I don't have that in front of me. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about your origins, where you're coming from.
Yeah. So, like she mentioned, my name's Savannah. I am from Ketchikan, Alaska. I am part of 3 different tribes. I am Tsimshian, Haida, and Nez Perce. Tsimshian and Haida are 2 of the tribes of the Southeast Alaska area. Nez Perce is a plateau tribe, so Oregon, Idaho area. And the art styles I work in are of those tribes. So you'll see here on the screen, there's 2 different art styles. The one on the right is called formline, and that is an art form used specifically by Tsimshian, Haida, and Tlingit people. It is similar to other coastal art forms, but what makes it different is specific shapes that only our tribes use. And then the one on the left is often called ledger art. When kids were taken to boarding schools and residential schools, they were often given blank ledger books to draw on, and those drawings were taken and then sold. But a lot of artists are reclaiming it, and so they'll draw on either antique ledgers or, like me, I don't have access to those, so I will hand draw a fake ledger out, and I'll often use family names of my friends to kind of fill out so it looks like a completed ledger, and then I'll draw over it. And often the imagery over is representative of my family as well. And there's not a lot of history behind ledger art and why facial features don't show up, but it's something you'll see common throughout. What I do like about it is that if you don't know who the person in the image is, you can still put your own people into it, whether it's family or friends. If you do know who it is, it's still very clearly recognizable. For example, I'm in this one. And so once you see me and once you see the art, you'll start to see me show up in various things. Or I sell some of these pieces and people will walk up to me and they'll say, wow, that really looks like Savannah LeCornu. Do you know her? And it's yeah, that's my aunt. This is Savannah LeCornu, actually. So those are a little bit about the 2 art styles that I work in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you live full-time in Alaska, yes?
Yeah, so I was born and raised there. I did go to college in Washington State. I spent about 10 years total there, 10 years after college, and then I moved back home recently. So I do live full-time in Alaska now.
Okay,
yeah.
But always that left coast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But tell us more about what your role is as an artist, what you feel your role is as an artist in making this work.
Yeah, so my family is very creative and has a lot of different types of artists, but not a lot of painters or drawers. So for example, my great-grandmother, she was a weaver. My grandmother, she beads and she also weaves. I have family members who've carved. My brothers are musicians, that kind of thing. So they've continued traditional art styles in those ways. But there wasn't a lot of people in my family drawing or painting or creating formline. So that was something. Is this how I move to just the next slide?
We're going to do the arrows.
Great, cool. So that was something when I was younger, I started picking up formline to kind of be that person so that I can kind of help be someone who preserves traditional art styles, but also can tell stories about my family and that kind of thing as well. So part of what I do as an artist is that I help preserve these art forms, but I also help bring them into a more modern setting as well too, because we are very much still here and we're not always traditional. Sometimes we're less traditional. So these are all formline pieces. The one furthest on the right is probably the most traditional, and it gets a little bit more modern focused from there. So for example, you wouldn't necessarily see the mix of something like this or the abstraction of something like this back when. But for me, I do like playing with the abstract versions of this and celebrating the shapes that make up formline as opposed to always creating the animals that make up our clans or our stories. So that's where you'll see some of that. These are all paintings, also all formline, but they're a little bit more abstract, and they deal with themes that weren't always themes that were dealt with. So a lot of traditional formline tells very specific stories, or it represents very specific families and families joining together. Whereas these three pieces do not do any of that. So the one on the right, the furthest right, is called Be Not Afraid, and it's inspired by biblically accurate angels.
So when you're saying furthest right, it's your right?
Yeah, sorry, my right, your left, my bad, yes. You read left to right, we're starting with that one. And I am not a religious person, I just think that the biblically accurate angels are wacky and weird, and I thought it would be fun to do a formline version of them. The other two are inspired by either pop culture references or my own family. So the center one is called Flaming Like Anything. It's part of a series of different formline sun designs that are more abstract, that just use pop culture references to determine the colors. And then the last one here is called Lamutits, which is a Nez Perce word for acting crazy, wild, hooligan type of thing. So we got called that a lot when we were younger. So it's supposed to kind of capture some of that feeling and that wildness. So that's part of what I feel is important for me as an artist, is to kind of help preserve, but also to kind of continue helping it to grow and be something both traditional and new. And that kind of leads into some of the work I've been doing more recently, which also is tending to explore themes that are not only not super traditional, but are often not talked about as well too. So there's a couple of things that I feel like Indigenous people don't always get to talk about without someone else putting trauma or other types of things onto it. And I think drinking is one of those. Oftentimes I feel like we only get to talk about it in terms of sobriety. And it's not always other Indigenous people who are kind of having that reaction. It's often non-Indigenous people. So I've been exploring what it's like to make art that kind of has a little bit of that influence, because I am someone who does have a relationship with alcohol and with drinking, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. Even though there is a lot of trauma that surrounds it, it doesn't always have to be that. And so I've explored that, and I like bringing up tough conversations. So I like people kind of having to look at something and ask a little bit more about it, and then kind of be forced to reckon with some of the preconceived notions they may have, and hopefully rethink some of that.
What is your medium that you're working in through the three different styles? Yeah, so the first three that I showed you, so the first five, I guess I showed you, were all digital done. So they were all done on my iPad. I live on a very small island that only has 2 print shops, and one of them you can't bring a physical copy in to get copies made, so it makes it very difficult to get prints made of things. And that is mostly what I sell, is art prints. So I work traditionally a lot, because then I can go to either print shop with my flash drive and get things made. The 3 on the last slide were all acrylic paintings. So those were all larger canvases with acrylic paint. This is back to digital. However, this piece has been done. The original piece was acrylic painting that I did at my last residency, and then turned into a digital print so that I can make it a little bit more accessible to folks, because that's important to me as someone who grew up poor. Art being accessible and affordable is the main reason I sell prints as opposed to originals. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm trying to conceive of the sort of the size of the formats, because in the previous one, for instance, you could see it's sort of in a setting, but do you tend to work in a smaller format? Yeah. And is that restriction from just your space, your workspace? Yeah.
Yeah, up until very recently, I have not had like a separate studio space. I do now. I share with 4 other artists, and it's an old fur shop that is no longer a fur shop, but is a place downtown where we make art.
When you say fur shop, what is?
They sold furs to tourists because it's a big tourist town. So if you came through Ketchikan, wanted a fur while you were there, you could go get that. But it had been closed for a while and it was an unused space. So they agreed to rent it out to us artists so that we could have a space outside of our apartments. But in the past, I've had very small spaces and had to work on a smaller scale. I also spent a lot of time working in theater. So drawing on an iPad was really easy because I could sit in the dark while we were waiting to go do other things and I could get drawing done. A lot harder to do with paints and canvas. So not that I haven't done that, but much tougher.
Was that during your time at university in Washington, or?
Yeah, so I majored in theater when I was in school, and then I started working professionally the summer after I graduated college. So I had 2 different house gigs. I worked as a lighting designer and master electrician for a regional theater in Bellingham, Washington, and then I worked as a production manager for the university where I went to school at. And so there was really long days and there's a lot of hurry up and wait. So it'd be like 2 hours of moving boxes and then like an hour and a half of standing still. So I'd be able to draw on my iPad. And again, much harder to pull out the paints. You usually had to wait till a lunch break for that, which again, have done, but have had to work in smaller scale for those reasons.
What is your sensation like working with the medium, that's the physical medium versus the digital medium? Do you feel more, I mean, for practicalities, I understand, but really what would your preference be as far as working with a medium? If you could,
it changes. It goes back and forth. Yeah. So I do really love working digitally. Sometimes it's very nice to hit undo and just be able to do that. And when you switch back to traditional drawing, it's really hard to break that habit. So I'll be drawing, I'll get to the pen and I'll go to like hit a button to like correct the mistake, and you can't do that. But it does feel different. It does feel better in a lot of ways to do traditional drawing and traditional painting. There is something about it that is so much more pleasing when you do something really steady or really cool. When you do it digitally, it's like, I'm like, whatever, like it's just for me. But when it's like,
sort of lacks the aura.
Like I just painted at a mural festival a couple weeks before I came here, and there is something just really satisfying about like doing a really long, broad stroke that's super straight, and like people see you do it, and they're just like, oh wow, great job, and you're like, thanks. Not only me saw that, great. And so I think I do prefer traditional mediums. It just can be so much more difficult sometimes, especially like paint layers, paint drying too fast or not fast enough. Tools not working, that kind of thing can be really difficult, but at the end of the day, it is something that I think if I had to pick one, it'd be more traditional. No shade to my iPad, which I brought though. Don't tell it I said any of that.
We won't say anything. We're going to get to it, but you also, and I mentioned the workshop that you did in Bridgehampton, and that you also do beadwork. So I know we'll get to it. I don't want to skip ahead if you're not ready to talk about it, or unless you want to go to the next slide. But that is another medium that you explore.
Yeah, moving right along, because we'll get to that soon. I do also do beadwork, which is the most three-dimensional thing I would say I do. It's still very two-dimensional in the way that I do it, but it is something that is something a lot of my family members have done, so I'm not by any means original in picking up beadwork as well too. But I guess I forgot to mention too, in all of these forms I'm self-taught. So formline, ledger art, all of that. And then even beadwork, it's like I've lived very far away from my family members, so I haven't always been able to like learn from them. And depending on the family members, some of them have been like not as willing to teach just because of their time spent in residential schools and how that was kind of forced out of them. So there's some things I haven't been able to learn from family members through no fault of their own, but that is also. So beadwork is something newer and something I kind of picked up more so back in 2020. And so that's like, you'll see, it's not as clean as everything else, but
we don't have to skip ahead, but definitely, here we go. I mean, these are stunning.
Yeah.
Tell us about these.
So a little bit about ledger art as well too. Like I mentioned, a lot of mine is very family based. So The first image you see is my grandma and all of her sisters. And then the second one is my uncle and my dad. They played basketball a lot. Basketball is really big in Indigenous country. So that's another thing is I do like, and my ledger art always has various like regalia as well too, because I'm not someone who can make regalia, but I can draw it. So I like to kind of highlight the different styles, and I like to combine both my art styles as well too, because so much of my family comes from these two different tribes that I like to represent both of them when I like create works about them.
Can you tell us a little bit about the facelessness of your personages?
Yeah, like I mentioned, there's not a ton of history, but it is something that like shows up very commonly throughout ledger art. Like you don't see a lot of ledger art that has facial features. My thought behind that is that when it originated, it was children, and facial features, even when you're been doing this for like 20 years, are still really hard. So when you're younger, I think it was easy to not have it. But I think it allows the art to be a little bit more versatile to whoever picks it up. Like I have sold these pieces to mainly people who are not my family. Don't get me wrong, my family loves them and they buy them a lot too. But I sell these pieces to people all over. Like for example, the basketball one, I have a dear friend who, he plays basketball, so his mom bought him that print for Christmas, which was also very sweet. So most, like, I think people can see themselves in it a little bit
relate
more.
To it.
Yeah, when it's not very, like if these were all hyper specific, I think I'd have a hard time doing much more with them besides just having art of my family, which at the end of the day, love them, mean it, but it's nice to be able to sell them as well too. So, and this is actually the first time I get to share these two images together. Like I said, a lot of mine are family oriented. This is my great grandmother and my great grandfather. They have both since passed away. But death is something that like I do often use art to explore and celebrate. My uncle, who is in the last one, has also passed away, and that art was created after he had passed. And so it has become kind of a thing to where like when I have someone in my life kind of move on, I'll create art pieces for them. So the very first one I did was the one of my great-grandmother, and then I created the matching piece for my great-grandfather later. And one thing that'll show up is the same color scheme will show up. So if you see a print of mine and it's got this very dark orange sun with a yellow background, it means they're no longer with us anymore. And it's just kind of my way of like celebrating them and helping them kind of like live on, and also providing my family with something that they can have as well too, to kind of help make everything easier. I think everyone in my family owns these prints at this point. And they were also given away at the 1 year like memorial of my great grandmother as well too. So it's also been, art has been a way to, you know, for me to preserve, to celebrate, and then also to just kind of remember as well too. And something else I do a lot is combining the art styles as well too. So you'll see formline and the more ledger style in all of these images because I am from both those tribes. And I've met a lot of people who are, you know, Tsimshian and Nez Perce or Haida and Nez Perce and have kind of like, you know, this same connection that I do. So I create a lot of this art for them as well.
Tell us a bit more about the image on the right, which almost has an anime quality to it. Yeah.
That's part of a series of art styles that like they all have women in that kind of ledger style with a formline image of some sort. The other two are actually self-portraits, so this is the only one in that series that is not a self-portrait. It's based on one of my cousins who is also Nez Perce. She had a really cool photo on Instagram one time, and I used that as the reference. And she ended up asking me, she was like, "Oh, is that me by chance?" And I was like, technically, yeah. So it was just kind of a way of, again, playing with some more modern ideas and bringing it. They also all have very like poppy color palettes, so less traditional color palettes to kind of like just bring that element. And that has been something that has like defined my style in a lot of ways, is the colors that I use. It's often less traditional, often a little bit more modern, and it's something that where people see it, they'll start to recognize my work a little bit more from it.
When you make these multiples, you're additioning. I mean, how do you work in that capacity with the multiple prints? You know, do you have a limited edition and? how do you work with that?
Yeah, it varies. Most of my prints aren't limited edition. They kind of run until I feel done running them, some sooner than others.
So you really want to get these out in the world.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like I enjoy making prints. I make, because I run a Patreon, which is a monthly subscription type of platform, I make 3+ new drawings every single month for that alone. So then I hopefully sell those as well too. If something doesn't sell very well immediately, I'll usually kind of like stop printing it and that kind of thing. I usually cap prints around 100, 200, and then I'll kind of stop printing them. None of them have really, I have 2 prints that have reached that 100 bench line. Other than that, they're all in these lower numbers still. And then there are limited runs. So for example, this one, that's part of a series of 3. I did only 25 of each of those. So there's only 25 of them. I'm not going to run that print again. And it's also a larger print. It's 11 by 17. So if you see it out in the world, fairly limited edition run. Or if you want one, let me know. So it just depends. And again, I try to keep everything really accessible and affordable. So that's also why I don't run limited edition prints, because I have to ask a little bit more money for them. It's also why I don't do a lot of poster sizes either, because I have to ask $40 or $50 for that. And most of my prints cap out at $20. So I would rather be able to sell more to more people have access to it than a limited number of people. Or I don't love the idea of one person owning the only version of something made. Like, I do make original work, don't get me wrong, and I like selling it, but I do it often when I'm at residencies, or if I am applying for a specific gallery, I'll do it, but I don't love the concept of art being kept for just one person. So
exclusive. Mm-hmm. And you said 11 by 17. So what are the sizes, for instance, of the 2 on the left?
Yeah, the furthest one over there is 5 by 7.
So
this one in the center is 8 by 10. So yeah, they also run on a smaller scale. Very easy to frame though, so
yes.
That helps, I think. And then also, as mentioned before, I do beadwork. This is actually something I made at Ma's house in the last week. So
which I was going to ask, obviously, how you came to be at Ma's house and how that has been for you.
Yeah, Ma's house is a residency I've actually followed for a few years now, like since it kind of got started, and it's something I've wanted to do since then. I think at the time it got started, I was still married. I was still in a place where like I had done one residency by that point. I had done my very first residency, and it was kind of clear that she didn't necessarily want me to like be off traveling all the time. So I kind of limited what I was applying to, and like I started like not really applying to things because I didn't want to be away from home. Granted, it went both ways. I didn't want to leave her either, but that was kind of the crux of it. But it was one that has been like on my list of residencies to apply to for the entire time it's been around. And so when I did finally apply recently, I saw that Jeremy also followed me on Instagram, and I was like, oh, this is great because I might have a better shot of getting in now.
It's meant to be.
It's meant to, I was like, yeah, I'm in. No, but then I did get to come, and it's been really great.
So this is your first time in this area at Ma's house?
Yeah, this is my first time at Ma's house. This is my first time in the state of New York. This was my first time going to the city. And this was that was kind of like the catalyst to get me over here. Was I wanted to have a residency to bring me over here versus just traveling, because full-time artists can't really afford to just make trips. And so it's been really good. It's been really good to see a whole different place, to be on different tribal land as well too, and to meet so many people. I got to go to the powwow over the weekend, and that was it's been a long time since I've gotten to go to one, and it was just really cool to meet so many of Jeremy's family, so many of the community members, and it was just really such a good experience. And it felt like being home again, which I really liked, and that is like something I noticed about being around other Indigenous people. They'll make you feel at home really quick, and that was really good because I've been away from home and a little homesick, and so that's all been really positive. And it's been a really cool place to work. It's been really inspiring in a lot of ways, and Jeremy himself is really inspiring, so it's like to be next to someone who like has done so many cool things, not only in photography, but like also just creating this space to support artists is just really inspiring as well. So I haven't made a lot of work, but one of the things I have made is this fish, which is a gift for a friend for his birthday. So because we've been fishing rubber rockfish all summer, and that's what this is. This is a rockfish. It's also one of the more detailed beaded pieces I've done in a long time. So
Beautiful. Yeah.
and you guys are the first ones to see it. Not a lot of people have seen it yet, so.
And what's next?
Yeah, so beadwork is one thing I do use to explore like pop culture and far less traditional things. So I found that since I've been working professionally, I'm often, for lack of a better word, pigeonholed into being being an Indigenous artist. Like I'm often not considered for the other art that I do. So I don't always do Indigenous art. It is Indigenous because I'm Indigenous, but I often do things that have nothing to do with formline or ledger art or my family. And those often don't sell very well. They don't get me much recognition and that kind of thing. They're often ignored, which I get in a lot of ways. But beadwork has been a really cool way for me to explore some other styles of art without kind of like separating fully from from being Indigenous, because beadwork is very inherently Indigenous as well. So most of my work you'll find is very silly goofy. Like I make cigarette earrings. I release those every so often. I'm from an era where cigarettes were sold singly for a little while there. So these are sold as single earrings to represent that. The one on the other side is from the movie Jeepers Creepers, which I don't know if a lot of you have seen it. It's a really bad horror movie. That natives seem to love weirdly though. There's so many other natives I've met who are like, oh yeah, Jeepers Creepers. And I'm like, hey, cool. We all had the same VHS growing up. We all watched it at summer school apparently. So that's, the bulk of my beadwork you'll find is a little bit on the silly goofy side.
And sort of pop references.
A little pop reference, yeah. I'll release collections every now and then. Like the last one I did was like an Animal Crossing theme. So it was all from that video game. I do a lot of video game beadwork, so Stardew Valley, Legend of Zelda, those have all shown up. Or I'll do like, one of my last collections was also like Rainier cans and American Spirit cigarette packs and that kind of thing. So even if it's not like pop culture, it'll be somewhat in the zeitgeist of other things. Yeah. That being said, I do also do traditional things as well. So the floral is a traditional Nez Perce floral. It's beaded on canvas, 11 by 17 specifically, so slightly bigger, very hard to bead, as you might imagine. I created it for like one of my first galleries that I was accepted to in Seattle, and so wanted to I had some paintings and wanted to share beadwork as well. These two are some of my newest pieces I've created. They were for an exhibit back home called Deconstruction that the studio that I share with other artists put up. As you can see, they're literally being deconstructed. This one, the pink background is called Ripped From, the blue background is called Stolen, and both of them start to come apart towards the ends, and they're meant to represent all of the beadwork and regalia that has remained stolen or unreturned. So yeah, we also get a little traditional with the beadwork as well too. So.
Yeah, when I asked you earlier about your role as an artist, I mean, here clearly there's also obviously the reference to history, but it's sort of a socio-political content as well, yes?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I like starting difficult conversations these days. I've spent a lot of time, when I was starting out, not knowing how to combat some of the things that were happening to me as an artist. So I was in Washington State when I first got going professionally, where not a lot of natives don't look like I look. So to a lot of people, they would assume I wasn't native. So I would get a lot of combativeness when I would show up with my art because I didn't look a certain way. And it was like they had a very clear one-dimensional idea of what natives look like, where it's like, I'm back in Alaska and no one questions like who I am in any way. Or, other, people of color don't question whether or not. So it was something where I was like facing a lot of people arguing with me about whether or not I had the right to create the art I was creating, or if it was someone else's art and I was just selling it, or if I got permission. And it was always an argument. It was never just me simply answering this question. And
you're arguing your identity.
yeah, it was always like, I was like, no, this is mine. And like, but you must have got it from someone else. It's like, no, this is my original work, this is mine. To the point to where I used to joke that I would just keep my blood quantum paperwork out on the table so people would just stop asking me. But that's also very problematic and terrible in its own way. So we didn't do that. But it was something where like for a long time I didn't, I considered not selling art in person to avoid some of these things because it just didn't feel worth it. I would kind of like, and people would argue me with enough to where I started thinking I was like having incorrect information. Like even with the art style too, people would be like, oh, this is Coast Salish art. And I'm like, oh no, it's formline. And they'd be like, oh, it's the same thing. And I was like, wait, am I wrong? Have I been getting this? And it's not, but it was just, people would argue so vehemently. So for many years I did, a lot of like, just art that was kind of for me more so than anything else. And then the thing that really got me noticed to some degree was I created 2 series called Still Here and Indigenize. And they were both series that kind of like talk about how the land. So Still Here would depict indigenous peoples in different like cities. So I had a Seattle version, I had a Portland version, Bellingham and Ketchikan, which were all places I have spent time at. And so the idea was like, hey, we're, for those who don't know, which is a surprisingly large amount of folks, Native peoples are very much still here. And the Indigenized series was, I would draw different landmarks and national parks and that kind of thing and return the indigenous names. So Denali, Colshan, various mountains and that kind of thing, and there'd be a formline art element to it. And those were the 2 that kind of started getting me a little bit more noticed. And they were kind of the first things that I put out there that felt like they said something versus just art for me. And over the years, I've been leaning more into that, just to kind of like be on the other side of these conversations. So instead of like having someone tell me, and like argue with me, I am now sharing these things and arguing with people about, the knowledge they just don't have.
You get ahead of them.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't. I lead a tour back home because it's a cruise ship town. I lead a pub crawl tour. And my tour can get pretty unfun pretty quick, but partially because, yeah, but part of that is because I make it very clear straight out the gate that I'm Native. And part of that is like, there's not a lot of bar history, just generally speaking. It's an 1.5-hour tour, so I run out of things to talk about. So I like to talk about art, and I'll mention I'm an artist because inevitably someone says, what kind of art? And then I show them, and sometimes they buy it, and it's great. Other times, they want to have, an 1.5 hour of very specific, very uncomfortable questions about what it's like to be Native, or they want to argue with me about just the knowledge that they think they have. So I have found that like a lot of folks who take this tour are coming from areas, and hate to say it, a lot of it is from the eastern side of the United States, that they're, they just don't have a lot of knowledge. Like they don't know that there are so many tribes that even like were and still are, or that, I had a comment recently where they're like, oh, well, there wasn't that many indigenous people before. It's like, that's simply untrue. And so I'm realizing that I grew up in a place where a lot of people have a lot of knowledge about the tribes that are around, because in Alaska, there's, a decent amount of us in this smaller population still just around and like making it very well known. And in Washington, there's so many tribes that it's like you can't not know some of this history. Like you really have to like keep your head in the sand to like not have any kind of knowledge. So I'm finding that not everywhere is like that though. So I've been making a point to kind of like start some of those conversations or share some of that knowledge with people who don't have it. So I'll show my art on these tours, and oftentimes, it'll be very positive, and then like, oh wow, this is all things I didn't know. I'm learning so much, and they'll know that there's all of these different tribes that have nothing to do with the tribes they thought they knew of, and they like learn a bunch of knowledge, and that's always the positive out of it. And even if it becomes an argument, hopefully they still walked away learning something. So that has been the goal recently with some of my newer works, is just to kind of like have different conversations or share more history, more knowledge.
Yeah. I can totally relate, and just like a little side story, because I, coming from Venezuela, used to represent artists from Latin America, and I would be in a similar position. I'm not comparing, but it would be sort of arguing that yes, there is a Latin American artist whose last name can be a German last name, that not everybody is Garcia, or things like that. So I understand that sort of belligerent ignorance that some people demonstrate, and we're always so grateful when people just kind of listen and get it.
Yeah, the last name thing's funny because you'd think with just the history of what happened to like indigenous peoples, people would realize that like, yeah, your last name likely wasn't your original given name.
Yes.
Like I mean, often your first name is not your original given name; it's your taxpayer name, which is a term I heard at the powwow this weekend, and I really liked it. Your taxpayer name. I love that. Yeah. But yeah, so it's like my last name's French, but I'm not French by any means, and so having people not realize like, oh, well, how could that be? It's like, well, I mean, these names were,
Well, isn't even
given.
the name of Nez Perce? I mean, that is.
Yeah, Nez Perce is not even.
It's a French.
Yep.
Term. So,
yeah.
right?
So, and often there's terms that have been like well known that like are not terms that we should be using. For example, like the for lack of a better way of saying it, the Eastler that is like often describing northern Alaskan indigenous peoples like was a term that like white people used to like was a derogatory term for those peoples. So they said that to like Inuit, Athabaskan, and a lot of other northern tribes, and it's like not a term that should still be used. But
what
for
is
many
the
years,
term again? Sorry?
I don't want to say it because it's like,
it.
but
okay.
it's like it starts with an E.
You said the Eastler.
Yeah, it starts with an E. I
Sorry,
think it's shown up throughout, like, and for a long time it wasn't, the history of that term wasn't known. So it was just like, oh no, they're this, and it's like, oh, it's just actually not. So, more you know.
The more you know, yeah. And so what is, this is the last slide? No.
Yeah, there's a couple more. So these are just some of my more recent things, again, exploring just kind of different themes and more modern stuff. So example, this is the painted version of the piece you saw earlier. The 5 images under it are like 5 of my friends back home who, all of these paper bags were made at my last residency. I was in another place that wasn't easy to get art supplies, so I was being very like precious with the paint that I had for some reason. And so when I would finish a painting and had leftover paint, I would use, I wanted to kind of like still paint more things, but I didn't have more canvases. So I took apart the paper bags that I had and painted my 5 friends who I'm really close with, and then also these mountains and teepee and ponies, and they all have like fun, silly, goofy little titles, because I also love a silly, goofy title. And what's been cool about these is like people have really liked them, and I've sold 2 of them, which is wacky to be selling paper bags to people, and it feels like the ultimate like me getting away with something. Like, I got you to pay over $100 for a paper bag. I made it somehow. I don't know. There's something about it that's very satisfying, but I do also just think that they turned out well, and I think people liked them. But that's some of my most recent work, and then these are some of my most recent paintings. These are all like a way I've been exploring abstract formline to like create other things and again talk about themes that are not often talked about. So these are all pint glasses to again represent kind of like a different way of thinking about what alcohol might look like to a person. And so they also all have different titles that are like somewhat related to things me and my friends have said while drinking, that kind of thing. So for example, this one here, the pink background, it's called, I don't know, $12, which is the only amount I've ever been charged at the Totem Bar when my friends work there. So depending on what I drink, no matter what, I say, hey, what do I owe you? And they say, I don't know, $12. And that's how much I pay there. So we made a painting about it. And so that's the thing. It's like as much as it's like these are paintings to kind of talk about difficult things, they're also things to talk about fun things in my life as well too. Like I spend a lot of time with these people who've shown up in like some way in these paintings, and this is kind of a way to celebrate them and like the relationship we all have together as well, while also being something you can talk about. So.
Well, it sounds like you have wherever you are, you bring together a wonderful community that you portray and feel supported by, and it's not just your family, it's friends, and and here we have a new community for you. So this is the last slide. I wanted to, maybe we segue into the hands-on portion. Whoever would be interested in doing that, we welcome you to do that. I wanted to make note of one thing. Usually I'm not the one who moderates these talks, and I'm sorry you didn't get to meet Mago, our dear friend, Enrique Martinez, and I just wanted to acknowledge that he has been the most terrific moderator in the past, and we miss him today because he was pulled away with another event. So, but I am so pleased to be here with you. And perhaps before we do the hands-on portion, if anybody would like to ask a question of Savannah, please, I can even maybe approach you, or you can come up so we can hear your question. Anyone? No? Yeah? Elka?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you very much. These pieces, which I'm really very attracted to just personally, I know you said a couple of times that it's bringing up a difficult subject, and yet, for the viewer, if I had come upon this in a gallery, I would not necessarily know that it's about a conversation around alcohol and alcoholism, which is difficult. And then you title it in a way that makes it even more engaging and fun. So I'm curious, is your hope that people will know that that it's a difficult subject, or no?
I went back and forth with that a little bit. All of the pieces I have that kind of reference drinking in some way have titles that you wouldn't get straight out the gate. I think the most obvious one is the one on the far bottom is called Blackout Tuesday, which that's a little bit more obvious. We have a running joke back home that like anytime we're out, it's Blackout Tuesday, and people are like, well, it's Thursday. We're like, you heard what I said, Blackout Tuesday. And that's kind of just like a joke that we have. But the rest of them are a little less, yes, they're a little less obvious. And I didn't want to necessarily like spoon feed what these were to the audience, especially with the first one I did, which is that longer one. That one has a title that I often don't explain the title. Like I let it sit and people can think about it and put whatever they want onto it. And that's kind of like, it's more of an inside joke for the people who do know what it is. When at the exhibit for the 4 paintings, there is a slight description because I went back and forth on whether or not to include one. And I did experience at the powwow selling these pieces as prints without explaining what they were. And it was interesting to see what people thought they were, because someone, they're like, oh, well, it feels very jazzy. It feels like jazz. And I liked that as well, too. I like that you can kind of still create something else with it. It doesn't have to necessarily be what I meant. But it has been a conversation that has been something I've like enjoyed also just having with folks. And the reaction has been generally really positive as well, too. And it feels like people get it. Like I say this thing and everyone nods and they say yes. And so the description will let you know. Like they'll see the titles and then it says, you know, and I am lucky enough that the person who hosts our studio space, it's a year-long residency, if you will. One of them is a museum curator in town. So when we were putting this exhibit together, I asked him like, hey, should I have like an extended description or not? Like, I don't know that people will get it necessarily without it, but also I don't want to like bang them over the head with it. So we settled on something, and he was like, no, you should have one, because if people want to like view it without that, they'll view it without it and then they'll read it. And if they don't, then they need the description. And so it landed on something pretty straightforward where I think it was, like most things, the ability to talk about alcohol without trauma was taken away from Indigenous people. So the artist invites you to like look at these and get rid of all those preconceived notions and just see what you would like to see with them. And that's where people like, I think really like the titles, and it kind of lightens the mood a little bit, because it's not necessarily about, and I think that's the goal, is it's not about alcoholism so much as it is that we can have that relationship without it being bad. And so often you see art that does the opposite, you know, where it has to talk about alcoholism. And I just wanted to do something that didn't do that, because we all have different levels of it.
Yeah, or that it does, but it doesn't, as you say, hit you over the head. So there's a certain therapeutic aspect to it, but it's not an obvious one.
Yeah, and like you know, it may drinking's fun. And I feel like we're the only ones who don't get to talk about drinking being fun. Like, no one tells an Irish person that they can't talk about drinking being fun, but for some reason it, happens with Native folks. And so I wanted these to be fun. And so that's like also why the colors are as like poppy as they are too. And if you hear the stories behind all the titles, they become very fun as well, so.
Interesting. Any other questions for Savannah? No? Yep. Yes.
I was just curious about the term formline because I hadn't heard about that, and just, technically, like how it's done, or even thinking like if we're doing collage, they even look like cut out. The line is so crisp it looks cut out, or is it just drawing and filling in like those are?
Yeah. So formline. Is just the name to kind of differentiate it from other coastal art styles, because like I mentioned, some of them are similar and use similar shapes. So formline uses very specific shapes to either create the animal or fill the space you're working within. So you'll see like these rectangle shapes typically will be filled in some way. Formline uses shapes that other coastal tribes don't. So for example, if I can get this one, that's called the U shape. As you might imagine, it looks kind of like a U. That one's upside down, but in general, that's the U shape. That is one shape that like is specific to us. You'll often see it in, like tails and various things like that, and fins. One of the other shapes that is specific to us, let me see if I have a good example. Actually, we'll go back to this one. That one up there is called the ovoid. That's also specific to formline, where it's like the crescents and the S shapes and some of the other things you'll see. You can see those in other art forms. Those two are specific to us. So you use these to manipulate whatever subject matter you're working within. So you'll see whether we're creating animals or more abstract, the same shapes show up throughout, and they're just manipulated differently. I hope that answers the question. We won't be doing, you could attempt some formline with like what we're doing, but what we're doing is going to be, it'd be tricky, but you can definitely attempt to make it happen.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much. We didn't start on the being fair with you, so maybe you talked about it. I think that several times you referred as we decided not to do something, or who are the we?
Oh, that's just me. I think that's just kind of a habit I've gotten into.
The royal we.
Yeah, it just kind of been something where, and that being said, I do have a very tight-knit community that I do often like, when I'm working on something, either like share works in progress and like ask for opinions and that kind of thing. So generally I just mean me. But that being said, it would be ridiculous to say that I do all of this without any kind of like community helping me out in some way. So at a time like back when I was married, like that was something like my ex-wife helped a lot with these things, or it's like, I'm not sure about this, or, I'd be working on something and have her help me with like things, especially if I was struggling on certain designs. Now it's a little bit less that. Now it's like I have like a group of friends who like every once in a while I'm like, man, I'm not sure if this is coming together, and I'll just send them a picture and they hype me up, or they are the worst and they tell me it's bad and then I still make it anyway. Or even the beaded fish that I shared, like that was something where I almost gave up on that I was pretty far in when I was like, I don't think this is turning out. And luckily I was able to like text it to a friend who knows the person who's getting the fish and was like, hey, is this anything? And I'm like, yeah, Savannah, it looks great. And I was like, okay, cool. I just wasn't sure. I was about to start over. So there is a group, it is a community effort to get some of my works out there, because I am a very anxious person and struggle with that sometimes. And like, it's very easy to be ready to give up on something, or think something's not good enough, or feel like something's not turning out. And luckily I have folks who kind of make me feel dumb for wanting to give up and like get me to the end goal, which is often needed. So that kind of, hope that answers it a little bit.
All right. Okay, so should we give a try to the collage activity then?
Yeah.
And close this out? Are you ready, or did you want to say anything else before we go?
No. Yeah, if there's no other questions, then happy to jump into the collage thing. While I have a microphone, I'll explain it a little bit.
That's
so
a great
in
idea.
case
Yes.
it's quiet later. So this is like somewhat of a curated collage. Like I brought very specific materials for you all to use. And so what we're going to be doing is I have these small like raindrop cutouts that you are going to be collaging on. The goal is to use these in the next exhibit that I'm working on, which is at the studio back home. It's called Reconstruction. First one was deconstruction. And my hope is to make something rain themed because Ketchikan is the rainiest place in the world.
And here we are.
Here we are. And weather worked out. But because I want to reuse these later in a larger installment, that's why some of it's a little curated. So the paper I brought is all like a little specific, and also like there's only so many blocks of it. So you guys have to be really willing to share and ready to move around and that kind of thing.
So in other words, you all are helping to create.
Yeah, so you're helping to create something
One of
that
your
I will
artworks.
use to recreate something bigger. And so my hope is that this is kind of a big rain feature with these paper raindrops. We'll see how that actually comes to fruition, because as I mentioned, I am not a 3D artist by any means, but we're trying this time. So my hope is to like take all these raindrops that you create and either add to them with like beadwork or backing or other things, and then create a bigger piece with it. So if you follow along, eventually you might see some of your raindrops
Yeah, and
in Alaska.
That reminds me then, if you can give us places where people can learn more about your work, see what you're up to. I guess Instagram might be the best place.
Yeah, Instagram is the best place. You can find me under Savannah Pants. That's like my name and pants. And so that's the easiest. If you Google that, I usually pop up pretty quick these days, which is the fortunate thing about doing a couple residencies and having a couple galleries at this point is pretty easy to find me these days. So yeah, Instagram's the easiest because that's where I post the most, and it also has links to every other website that I have as well too.
Terrific. Good. So you'll be able to see what you contributed to.
Exactly, yeah. So that opens in November, so keep an eye out. So yeah, coming up soon actually.
And where is that again, please?
So that'll be back home in Ketchikan. So we have our studio space, it's called Insert Art, and part of our residency in getting this space is that we have to do 3 exhibits this year. So our first one opened in August, it was called Deconstruction. That's where you saw the ripped from and the stolen beadwork were part of that, along with those formline pints. My goal was to deconstruct themes and then literal deconstruction with the beads. Reconstruction was the title for the second one. I'm still figuring out exactly what I want to do with that, which is where this activity came in. Seemed like a fun idea to get some things I can use again later. And then the third one's not named yet, but it'll be somewhat sexual in some way. That's the goal, and that's the theme behind the third one. So if you want to follow along, those will be the 3 exhibits I'm doing this year.
Great, wonderful. And what is the museum called that is in your town?
We don't.
You said you had a museum curator.
Yeah, so there's the Totem Heritage Center is one of the museums there that mainly focuses on various totem poles in different states of being, what's the word? Reconstructed's not the word, but it's similar to that, where they're revitalized and that kind of thing. So Totem Heritage Center is one of them. There is another museum, I believe. I don't know why I can't think of it off the top of my head because it's in the old library building, so now I don't remember the name. But there is another one there as well. We also have our Arts Council, which is the Ketchikan Arts and Humanities Council, which is a gallery space as well. And then now we have Insert Art, which is our studio gallery space.
Yes.
Can I ask about your Patreon? I just saw it up
Yes.
going through Instagram. Like,
Please.
It sounds like any advice you have for other people who want to get on Patreon, and how does yours work? And you get the I don't know what's the experience been like over there?
Great question
Yeah.
about Patreon, yeah.
So yeah, as I mentioned, in case you didn't hear, Patreon's a monthly subscription platform. There are different tiers and different artists all do it pretty differently. I've been running mine since 2017, and it's been like a real learning journey to like get to the point to where I'm at today. So I have 3 tiers on my Patreon. I have a $1 tier where you get like a digital wallpaper for your phone every month. They're usually kind of pop culture themed, which is a fun way for me to just get to do silly art about whatever I'm currently obsessed with. So like I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, so last month's theme was Magic the Gathering. Theme changes every single month. This upcoming one is called Together, because of the horror movie Together that came out, so I'm gonna make some art for that. I have an $8 tier, which gets you a small print or a sticker pack, depending on my mood every month. Less stickers, more prints, but every once in a while we do something different. Or if you join by October, it'll be all my October original drawings that I do. And then I have a $20 tier, which is the large print, and you just get a different large print each month. So most of the prints you see here were given away on my Patreon at some point. So this is a more recent one that I created for Patreon. Actually, all three of these were created for Patreon at one point, and now I sell them as well. Most of my art, you'll find, was created for Patreon. Because again, I gotta keep doing it. And some of these people have been on my Patreon since 2017. So if they're getting a piece of my art every month for, you know, what is that now? 8 years?
Almost, yeah. Almost
they have a
10
lot of
decade.
art. There was a running joke with my great-grandmother, because she was one of my great-grandparents were on Patreon for a long time with me. And they would not give any of that art away. Like, they had so much of it. And when my great-grandmother passed, I was at the funeral, and I was going and hugging my grandma, and she told me that. She was like, yep, she wouldn't give us any of that art. She didn't, up until the day she died. She kept it all, which was so much, and some of it wasn't that good. But so for other artists, I would say it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work figuring out like what works for you and what is manageable. Like when I first started, my tiers were $3, $10, and $20. And for $3, I gave away original drawings. It was a different original drawing every month. One of the things I gave away to someone in that tier, because there was only one person in that tier for like 2 years, and he got like this painting that I ended up doing different versions of, and I would sell for $45. So he got that for $3. So it was a good time to be on my Patreon back in the day. My $10 tier, I did 4 original drawings every single month and gave those away. So luckily it never got over 4. But even when I started working on a tarot card deck, and some of the earliest cards were for that tier, and so some people have the original cards that I was working on that I've had to redraw because I gave them away like a fool. I didn't give them away, basically gave them away. $10 is nothing. The $20 is the only one that's been pretty solid throughout. I've obviously had to make some changes. It was getting to a point where like I think I had like maybe 10 patrons, and I was like, I am making too many things each month, and this is getting very stressful. And so now I've kind of honed it to where it's really easy for me to make a small print design, a large print design, and 1 wallpaper. Like that's all very doable and manageable. I rarely feel stressed. I get behind sometimes. This is a great month for that, but it's been a lot of traveling. So for other artists though, I would recommend just finding something that like feels doable. And the nice thing about it is that, like I said, I am creating new things every month. So it's kind of like being back in school when you like had to create. You didn't like, if I left to my own devices, maybe I wouldn't draw as often. But like because I have these deadlines, I like find myself like creating more. And when I've struggled with like what to create, because that's been something that's been a little tricky the last couple months, which you might imagine after doing this for 8 years, eventually you kind of start to run out of ideas. But luckily I have a community that gives me ideas, and they're like, you know, they might not be the most like visual artists, but they're really good with coming up with like ideas. So they help me with that. If you do something that's non-visual, I would say Patreon's kind of tough. For musicians, it's not a very easy platform to work in because not being able to give away something tangible is a hard sell. My ex-wife tried to do it for a little bit because she was a musician, and like people didn't really want to sign up to pay $10 a month to not get something physical. And music you can't really like give away in that capacity. But for visual arts, very easy. It is a little hard to build the community. I'm lucky that I have now 20 people, 23. Maybe it's a little bit more. I have a like slightly larger community that has stayed with me for many years. And so they just really like getting art. And some of them have even been like, hey, don't send me art anymore, but I'm gonna keep paying you. Like, so and I will say most people are like not people I know. Like I have not met them all personally. And that's been a really interesting thing to watch people I've never met hang out for 4 years and get art from me, which has been really cool. So lots of positives. But it does take a while to kind of find how to make it work for you. And it's hard to advertise, I will say. That's like kind of a tricky thing. So I'm fortunate that people stick around as long as they do because it's been a minute since I've got a new Patreon. That being said, last summer, someone from my pub crawl tour joined. which I was not expecting.
Well,
so
there you go. I
there you
feel
go.
like you're underestimating your capacity to do things. You could almost do a podcast, my friend.
I
feel like
honestly
little-
am surprised
like
how well
little
this went, because
monthly
normally I
words
don't
of
talk about
wisdom.
this. Yeah, I'd run out of words of wisdom quick, I think.
Oh gosh. All right. Let's move on to the hands-on
Yeah.
activity. Okay. And please feel free to. There's beverages up front here, so please feel free to grab something as well on your way. All right.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.